This is a reading of the text of the Alamo Story and Battleground Tour produced by computer software. This book may be purchased at the Alamo or ordered online at www.alamostreetour.com. Stop listening and reading before crossing streets, so you may cross safely. The Alamo Story and Battleground Tour, page 5, Introduction. Early Texas was a Spanish frontier where few civilized men wanted to dwell. A vast area that included parts of 4 other modern-day states, Texas was full of wild longhorn cattle and wild Indians. The focus of the Alamo story is how this wild Spanish frontier became an Americanized heartland that large numbers of men would kill one another to own. Although the Alamo story portrays a theme of sacrifice, it is a story not just about dying. Rather, it is a story that celebrates the heroic nature of men and the human side of heroic events. I think the Alamo story is best told on the streets of San Antonio because the ground where it all happened, the river, and the mission chapel are still there. So are the spirits of the men who lived the Alamo adventure. If you would like to hear the story, come with me now. I will tell you the story and show you the places where it all happened. Whether you visit San Antonio and walk the ground, or experience the tour in your mind, through these words and pictures you will be guided to sites in downtown San Antonio and around the Alamo. You will find maps and photographs to help you follow my directions, as well as drawings of how the sites must have been at the time of the siege in 1836. If you choose to walk, the tour will cover about 2 miles altogether. When you arrive at each location you can hear about the people and events that converged there. Then I will guide you to the next location and so on, until the story ends. At each location you will be asked to imagine that you and I are there on a day during the siege of the Alamo. Imagining can help you feel that you are part of what is happening. But don't get the idea that what I tell you is imagined. I have been careful to learn the facts. However, this is not a history lesson. So enjoy the story, and if you get tired of walking, take a rest. Page 12, Travis miscalculates, Siege Day 1, Main Plaza. Imagine that the time is 2:30 p.m. on the afternoon of Tuesday, February 23, 1836. Today is an unusually warm winter day, and we are in an open area, with no grass or trees, called Main Plaza. According to the Mexican Army map, Main Plaza is the geographic center of a town called San Antonio de Baja. To the Americans and Mexicans living here, in the Mexican state of Coahuila, Texas, who call themselves Texicans and Tejanos, this town is known simply as Bear. Today in Main Plaza, Texican soldiers are running and shouting as they quickly gather their belongings and retreat. They are retreating to the relative safety of the former Mission de Valero, which is known to all as the Alamo. The Texicans and Tejanos are retreating because, only 30 minutes ago, Mexican Army cavalry were seen at Alazan Creek just a mile and a half south of where we are. Now, as they are recovering from a fandango last night on Soledad Street, the astonished Texican soldiers are literally running for their lives from the Army of Mexico. Already in the Alamo, William Barrett Travis, the 26-year-old garrison commander for the Provisional Army of Texas Regulars here, has heard the rumor that the President of Mexico Antonio Lopez de Santana is coming north with an army. Almost everyone in Texas has heard it. But until now, Travis was confident that Santana would wait for the spring grass to feed his horses on the march north. Following Travis's schedule, Santana was not due in Bear until mid-March, 22 days from now. Clearly, Travis has miscalculated. Another 22 days would have given the Provisional Government of Texas time to gather and send men, weapons, and supplies to the Alamo. It is said that, all over the United States, men are marching to the rescue of their American brothers in Texas and bringing vast quantities of supplies and arms that people everywhere have contributed. But today there are only 156 fighting men in the Alamo, with few supplies, waiting to face the professional soldiers of the Army of the Republic of Mexico. But why are Santana and his battalions coming here at all? Why have they marched so far? Well, the answer is, to put it simply, for 136 years, Neither Spain nor Mexico has been able to entice enough nationals to live in Texas and secure it. Now Texas is full of stubborn, liberty-loving Americans, and Santana has a rebellion on his hands. It began in 1685 when Spain became concerned that France was trying to steal Texas, so Spain undertook a series of strategies to populate Texas with citizens loyal to King Philip V. The first strategy, beginning in 1693, was an attempt by Spanish Franciscan friars to civilize and Christianize the native Indian population that already lived in Texas. That effort produced what some call the mission system, which, in 1718, built the mission that would come to be called the Alamo. After 38 years, Spain concluded that the Apache, Comanche, and other Native American tribes in Texas, unlike the Aztecs and Incas in Mexico, could not be conquered, or, even if they were conquered, they would never be productive Spanish citizens. Therefore, in 1731, Spain set in motion another solution the friars suggested. This became Spain's second strategy. It involved trying to populate Texas with Spanish citizens. At the request of the friars, the Spanish government moved 25 families to San Antonio de Baja. 10 of the families came from northern Mexico, and 15 families were brought from Spain's Canary Islands, located off the northwest coast of Africa. The Canary Islanders were given the Spanish nobility title of Hidalgo, and when they arrived they behaved as if they were aristocrats. Like many of the Indian converts of the mission system, many of the Canary Islanders refused to work. Rather, they chose to fish, hunt, and exploit the mission for their livelihood. This second strategy to populate Texas produced little more than the building of a new church in Bear. That new church was the old San Fernando Cathedral, which was begun in 1731 and finished in 1750. It is the third site on our tour and follows our visit to Military Plaza. The final attempt to populate Texas was made by Mexico after gaining independence from Spain in 1821. Mexico's approach opened Texas to immigration from the United States. That strategy produced a revolution. How this revolution got started is the subject of the next part of our story, and our story will continue from the Military Plaza of Bear. End of chapter. Page 20, Santana enters Bear, Siege Day 1, Military Plaza. The Spanish Governor's Palace marks the northeast corner of Military Plaza. Although not part of our tour, it is an excellent representation of the Spanish colonial architecture you would have seen in the Yatari House and Verimendi Palace, if they still existed. You cannot see these buildings, but you will see where they were located. Imagine that the date is still Tuesday, February 23, 1836, here in Military Plaza. Like Main Plaza, Military Plaza is an open area without grass or trees that is surrounded by adobe barracks. The barracks were built in the 18th century to house soldiers who enforced Spain's laws against immigration and trade between Mexico and the United States. In those days, despite Spain's efforts, American adventurers stayed poised on the Texas border, like cats watching a goldfish bowl. The adventurers were always ready to reach into the bowl whenever the master's back was turned, and there were many exciting episodes. One such episode involved an effort in 1819 by James Long to separate Texas from Mexico and give it to the United States. His plot did not succeed because it was revealed to Spain by the famous pirate, John Lafitte. A similar scheme in 1826 involved an attempt by Hayden Edwards to carve out an entirely new country from the eastern part of Texas. He called his new nation the Republic of Fredonia. It lasted 6 weeks. American popular opinion supported these intrigues, for the people of the United States felt that Texas was rightfully theirs as part of the Louisiana Purchase of 1803. Then in 1824, as if responding to U.S. public opinion, Mexico began to allow Americans to enter Texas legally as citizens of a chartered colony. The government in Mexico City awarded the first and largest colony grant to 27-year-old Stephen F. Austin. Austin, who was continuing the work of his father Moses to populate Texas, secured permission to settle 300 families on land that centered around the town of San Felipe, 150 miles east of Bear. Those colonists did not enter Mexico as Americans, however. They were required to become Mexican citizens and to join the Roman Catholic Church. This conversion brought them certain American-style liberties under the Mexican Constitution of 1824, and soon the colonies began to grow and prosper. By 1830 the American immigrants made up 75% of the population of Texas, and the Mexican government became concerned about possible rebellion and secession. Mexico quickly stopped further immigration into Texas from the United States. It moved large numbers of Mexican army soldiers into Texas, and it attempted to tax the people of Texas to maintain those military garrisons. Such acts of tyranny were not unknown to the Texicans and Tejanos, because by 1830, only 45 years had passed since Americans in the United States had fought similar acts of British tyranny. And now the Texican descendants of the men of Valley Forge responded to Mexico in the way their grandfathers had responded to England. They rebelled openly. It could be said that Alamo defender William Barrett Travis launched the Texas Rebellion himself. In 1832 Travis led a group of 14 men in Anahuac on Galveston Bay, who took revenge on a Mexican army soldier for his attack on a Texican. Travis and the others were jailed by the Mexican army commander, but they were released when another group of Texicans and Tejanos mounted a cannon on a schooner in the bay and threatened to fire on the Mexican army garrison. This incident was followed by the Battle of Nacogdoches the same year, when a group of Texicans and Tejanos defeated the Mexican army garrison and sent them all home to Mexico. The next 2 years, 1833 and 1834, were relatively peaceful because the Mexican government eased its military rule and taxation. But in 1835, Santana took power. Early in 1835 Santana suspended the Mexican Constitution of 1824. Then he dispatched his brother-in-law, General Martin Perfecto de Cos, with 1,400 men and orders to occupy the Alamo and regain control of Texas. As Cos marched into Bear, a detachment of 100 cavalry under Captain Francisco Castañeda was sent from the Alamo to the town of Gonzales to recover a 6-pounder cannon that had been left there to help the citizens defend themselves against Comanche Indians. After refusing to give up the cannon to Castañeda, the men of Gonzales placed a banner on it that said to the Army of Mexico, "Come and take it." Then they sent out a call for help to their fellow Texicans and Tejanos. Like the Minutemen at Lexington in the American Revolutionary War, 168 Texicans and Tejanos gathered at Gonzales, and on October 2, 1835, they fired the first shot of the Texas Revolutionary War. 1 Mexican army soldier was killed, and the rest retreated in haste. No Texican was killed or wounded. Then, after almost 5 years of oppression, the Texicans and Tejanos had finally had enough. Events began to happen quickly. A little over 4 months before today, February 23, 1836, 500 Texican volunteers, led by Colonel Stephen F. Austin, left Gonzales and crossed the Guadalupe River to attack General Cos in Bear. Austin had just returned to Texas from a Mexico City prison where he had been confined for 2 years by order of Santana himself. On their way to Bear, the Texicans and Tejanos won yet another victory in a skirmish led by Jimboy at Mission Concepcion. The Texicans and Tejanos finally arrived in Bear on October 27 and laid siege to the Mexican army garrison. After a 39-day standoff, on December 5, 1835, the Texicans and Tejanos, led by Ben Milam, began house-to-house fighting. Within 3 days the Mexican army force defending Main Plaza and Military Plaza retreated down Commerce Street, across the footbridge, and into the Alamo. Then 2 days of bombardment by Texican cannons convinced General Cos to give up the Alamo, and on December 9, 1835, he signed a surrender in the Cos House in La Villita. Siege Day 6 of your tour will include a visit to the Cos House. This first battle of the Alamo ended in comparative felicity. The Texicans and Tejanos allowed the remaining 1,100 Mexican army troops to keep their arms for defense against Indians and to return to Mexico. The Texicans and Tejanos even cared for the wounded soldiers of the Mexican army who were left behind. In return, General Kos swore that he and his men would not fight again in Texas. But today, here in Military Plaza, the Army of Mexico is all around us and we hear them speak of the impending return of General Kos and his troops. We can see Military Plaza filling with mounted lancers, dressed in blue uniforms trimmed with crimson, and foot soldiers, dressed in white except for their tall, black Shakoa hats with red braid. Now we can hear the Mexican army soldiers cheer as we witness the glorious arrival of El Presidente Santa Anna, who is mounted on a white horse adorned with silver. He is passing near as he rides to his headquarters in the Yatari House at the northeast corner of Main Plaza. Since we do not know what Santa Anna's plans are, we will leave Military Plaza now. Let's walk over to the original San Fernando Cathedral and continue our story. We have already seen the second cathedral from Main Plaza. This time we will see the first cathedral that was built by the Canary Islanders and to which the second cathedral was attached. End of chapter. Page 28. Death Flag, Siege Day 1, San Fernando Cathedral. Consider that it is still Tuesday, February 23, 1836, the first day of the siege. The rear of the San Fernando Cathedral that we see across Flores Street appears much as it did when it was built, except then it had a bell tower. On this day in 1836, the bell tower is the highest point in Bear. Early this morning Colonel Travis noticed that many of the citizens of Bear were leaving town in a hurry, so he posted a Texican soldier as a lookout in the bell tower. Looking now at the bell tower we see a Mexican army soldier. He is tying a flagstaff to the cross on the top. Waving from the flagstaff is a solid red flag, the color of blood. The Mexican army soldiers are saying that the flag is a promise of death from Santa Anna to the men in the Alamo. They say that Santa Anna is in San Antonio de Baja now because he could not endure waiting until spring to fulfill that promise. His impatience cost the lives of hundreds of his men and animals who died due to the cold, the rain and snow, and the lack of food on the winter march north. Now we hear the boom of a cannon in the Alamo. The Mexican army officers are saying that this cannon discharge must be a reply from the Alamo defenders to Santa Anna's first act in Bear, the posting of a flag that says the Alamo defenders will all die. Ironically, the flag that promises death to Jim Bowie in the Alamo is waving above the church where he began the happiest days of his life only 5 years ago. It was here, in the San Fernando Cathedral, in 1831, that Jim Bowie married Maria Ursula de Verimendi, the beautiful 19-year-old daughter of the lieutenant governor of the Mexican state of Coahuila, Texas. The Verimendi family had a palace on the river here in Bear, only a short walk from Main Plaza where we were earlier. We will go to the site of the Verimendi Palace next. There we will talk about Colonel Jim Bowie. End of chapter. Page 34, Jim Bowie and Ursula, Siege Day 2, Verimendi Palace. The weather today, Wednesday, February 24, 1836, is even warmer than yesterday. The Verimendi Palace is located here at this peaceful place overlooking the river. The palace is made of adobe, like the Spanish governor's palace, and it is L-shaped with a large courtyard that opens to the river. Verimendi Palace has two enormous, carved wood front doors that open to Soledad Street. When opened, the doors are large enough for a mounted rider to pass through. They are inset with two smaller pedestrian doors. Jim Bowie called on Ursula Verimendi at her home here many times during their formal, Spanish courtship, and it is likely that they sat together on this spot by the river many times. Bowie came to Texas from Louisiana. There he earned a national reputation as a frontiersman who was good with a weapon called the Bowie knife. He is credited with designing the famous knife, although most people say it was given to him by his brother Azan. A successful slave trader, sugar grower, and land speculator, Bowie earned high social position in the US and Mexico. Bowie was 6 feet 1 inch tall. He weighed 180 pounds and had red hair. Bowie was 35 years old when he married Ursula. The women say that, under his tough exterior he was a gentle, devoted husband and father. Ursula, they say, was a warm and loving wife and mother. She always closed her letters to Jim saying, "Received thou the heart of thy wife." But less than 3 years after their wedding, Jim Bowie lost his entire Texas family when Ursula, their infant son and daughter and Ursula's parents, all died from cholera. Now, since those tragic deaths, Bowie seems to be living only to serve the Texas Revolution and defy Santana. Here we can see that Santana is answering Jim Bowie's defiance by turning Ursula's family home into the Mexican Army's first artillery emplacement of the siege. To the right, Mexican Army gunners are preparing to fire two 9-pounder, smoothbore cannons that they mounted here during the night. The soldiers are saying they must use these light 9-pounders because Santana's heavy siege artillery is still on the Camino de la Plata somewhere between Bear and the Rio Bravo River. The heavier, 12-pounder siege cannons weigh over 1.5 tons. It would take days for the oxen to pull one to Bear. Meanwhile, at a distance over 500 yards, these light 9-pounder artillery pieces do little damage to the thick Alamo walls. So these soldiers use their cannons like mortars to fire at a high arc over the Alamo walls with the hope that someone will be standing under the cannonball when it drops. Their odds of actually hitting someone in the Alamo are slim because the Texicans and Tejanos stay close to the walls, and they have a full 2.5 seconds to take cover after they hear a cannon boom. We hear the Mexican Army cannoneers here say they are actually reluctant to fire at all, out of fear that the Texicans and Tejanos will return their cannon fire. The Texican gunners have 3 12-pounders and an 18-pounder that General Cos had to abandon in the Alamo. These heavier weapons could be very effective against the small area around us here. The 18-pounder can easily drive a 5 1/3 inch diameter, 18-pound cannonball on a low arc to this place. On impact with a hard surface, the ball could break into hundreds of pieces of flying cast iron that could fatally wound anyone within range. Still, the Mexican Army soldiers have orders to fire, and they are suggesting that we leave before they begin. Let's walk over to the old mill ford, which is one of only 2 places where Mexican Army soldiers can cross the river. End of chapter. Page 44. First attack, Siege Day 3, Old Mill Ford. Near this place on June 13, 1691, the San Antonio River was given its name. The river was named by Father Damian Massanet, who was traveling with the first Spanish governor of Spanish Texas, Domingo Terán de los Rios. Father Massanet named these tranquil waters for St. Anthony de Padua because Massanet's expedition reached the river on this saint's day. To these travelers, water was life, and finding it gushing forth abundantly from an underground lake, pure and clear and cool, must have seemed like a miracle to the padre. Perhaps it was a miracle that Father Massanet found the water springing forth at just this place and that soon a colonial capital was built on the banks of the peaceful river that the waters sustained. Perhaps it was not by chance that a mission was built here, too, and that this mission became an outlying barrier that slowed advancing death until the fleeing people of Texas could gain strength, turn, and fight. Perhaps Father Massanet unknowingly consecrated this location as a birthplace for the Republic of Texas. Sadly, since we are here on Thursday, February 25, 1836, we must be concerned more with death than with birth. Santana now has 4 batteries of cannons mounted on the Bear side of the river, and he is maintaining an almost constant bombardment of the Alamo from the west, south, and northeast. Occasionally we hear a cannon round fired from the Alamo in response, but mostly the Texicans and Tejanos are saving their cannon powder and shot to oppose the major, all-out Mexican Army assault they know must come. But the Texicans and Tejanos do not seem to be conserving their rifle powder and ball. The range and accuracy of their long rifles have prevented Santana from bringing his small cannons close enough to penetrate the Alamo walls. From those walls, the Alamo sharpshooters, with their Lancaster and Kentucky rifles, have demonstrated a killing range of 200 yards and a wounding range of nearly 300 yards. We have heard the Mexican Army soldiers declare their amazement at the range of the Texican rifles. The range of the not-rifled India pattern muskets that the Mexican Army soldiers carry is barely 70 yards. As an added benefit, The danger of being hit by a Texican mini-ball has made the footbridge at the end of Commerce Street impassable to the Army of Mexico in daylight and nearly so at night. Since only two places to cross the river existed before, Santa Ana must now use the old mill ford, produced by an earthen dam just west of where we are, to move artillery and troops to the Alamo side of the river. Even now we can see Mexican army troops using the ford to cross the river, and we hear them complaining of wet feet. There appear to be about 300 of them, and they say they will use a 9-pounder cannon that just arrived to blow away the wooden main gate of the Alamo. They say they will use the houses in La Villita for cover to get close. The La Villita, or little town, they speak of, has existed for years as the shanty town of Bear. It is just across the river from us and we will go there next. End of chapter. Page 50. Casualties, Siege Day 4, Cos House. Imagining that our visit to La Villita is on Friday, February 26, 1836, we see that some of the dirt floor huts here are occupied by the Mexican army soldiers' wives and children, who followed their men north. One of the few adobe houses in La Villita is the house where we are now. It is called the Cos House because it is the place where General Cos signed the Army of Mexico's capitulation documents that ended the First Battle of the Alamo a little over 2 months ago. All around us we see the Mexican army soldiers that we watched crossing the old mill ford, but 2 are now dead and 6 are wounded from their battle near the main gate of the Alamo yesterday. The purpose of the Mexican army attack yesterday was to place a 9-pounder cannon close enough to the Alamo to destroy the south wall and the main gate. Since their attack failed, these Mexican army soldiers of the San Luis Battalion must fire a cannon toward the Alamo from here in La Villita. That means that Santa Ana still has no cannons closer than 500 yards, and the walls of the Alamo remain relatively safe on this, the 4th day of the siege. During the night a north air blew in, and the temperature is now in the 30s. The wood and grass huts of La Villita provide little protection from the strong north wind that continues to blow cold. Along with the cold, the wind carries the smell of smoldering straw and wood from huts that have been burned on the northern edge of La Villita. The houses that were burned are the same houses that the Mexican army soldiers used for cover yesterday when they attacked the main gate. Obviously some of the Texicans and Tejanos sallied against the houses last night to eliminate them as cover for further assaults. Now the Texicans' field of fire is clear to the southwest between the Alamo and the river. Travis seems to be trying to maintain the momentum the Texicans and Tejanos won at the main gate yesterday, for there is talk among the Mexican army soldiers of a cavalry battle this morning on the Gonzales Road. Let's begin heading toward the Alamo now. We will stop at the footbridge at the end of Commerce Street on the way. End of chapter. Page 56. No quarter, Siege Day 5, Footbridge. Our date today is Saturday, February 27, 1836. During the night the temperature fell to 39 degrees, and a strong north wind is still blowing. Here on the muddy banks of the San Antonio River is the only bridge that exists for miles. Before Santa Ana arrived, many of the Texicans and Tejanos who fought General Cos in December were staying in houses in Bear, and they crossed this footbridge frequently going to and from the Alamo. Bowie, Bonham, Crockett, Travis, their footsteps were all over this ground until 5 days ago when they crossed it for the last time. Travis was the last of these 4 men to be stationed at the Alamo. He was sent here personally by Republic of Texas Governor Henry Smith, along with 25 regular army soldiers led by Captain John Hubbard Forsyth. Travis was a man of fair complexion and red hair, standing about 6 feet tall and weighing 175 pounds. A lawyer, born and educated in South Carolina, Travis came to Texas in 1831 from Alabama. He left behind an unfaithful wife and a son whom she later delivered to Travis in Texas. On his way to the Alamo, Travis left his son in the care of his friend David Ayres at Washington on the Brazos. Now the boy waits for his father to come for him, and his father waits in the Alamo for victory or death to come for him. Because on Tuesday, at this footbridge, the Texicans and Tejanos learned there will be no other options. On that day Jim Bowie sent Major Greenby J. Masson to the footbridge under a flag of truce with a letter to Santa Anna. In the letter Bowie said he thought Travis might have been too hasty when he fired the cannon at Santa Anna's death flag. Bowie wanted to know if Santa Anna wanted to parley. After J. Masson's return from the footbridge, Travis sent Albert Martin here to invite Mexican Army Colonel Juan Armenti for a meeting in the Alamo. Santa Anna's response to both emissaries was that he wanted nothing from the Texicans and Tejanos except their unconditional surrender, and he promised no quarter, meaning that no defender's life would be spared. Now the Texicans and Tejanos give no quarter either, and the Mexican army soldiers dare not use this footbridge. The main body of Santa Anna's soldiers still has not arrived, but it may at any time. For the moment Santa Anna's siege continues. So does the siege mentality of Santa Anna's generals, for we have just learned from some townspeople, who came to the river for water, that Santa Anna's men have blocked the irrigation ditch that supplies water to the Alamo. Although a shortage of water may soon develop, it appears there is no shortage of food as we first feared. We are told that Texicans and Tejanos found almost 90 bushels of corn and close to 30 head of cattle in the Alamo when they retreated to it last Tuesday. The same day, Dr. Amos Pollard, the regimental surgeon, confiscated medical supplies from some of the houses in Bear. We are standing about 250 yards from the Alamo now, and we will go the next to see conditions for ourselves. End of chapter. Page 64, Perilous Walls, Siege Day 6, Southwest Corner. Many people believe that the Alamo consisted solely of the chapel we see across Alamo Plaza. In reality the Alamo covered nearly 3 acres and had a large plaza that was surrounded by walls from 6 to 12 feet high and 2 to 3 feet thick. During the siege the women and children stayed inside the chapel, some in the small room to the right of the front doors. The first room to the left was the powder magazine. On March 5, 1836, Jim Bowie, suffering from tuberculosis, was moved from the low barracks to the middle room on the left in the chapel. The last room on the left, the former sacristy, is where Susanna Dickinson, wife of Captain Emma Dickinson, and other women and children stayed during the siege. Visualizing the Alamo as it was on Sunday, February 28, 1836, the west wall of the Alamo stretched north through the buildings on our left for a distance of 150 yards. The west wall connected to the north wall, which stood about 30 feet beyond where the front doors of the post office are now. The north wall ran for 50 yards and connected to the east wall and the long barracks, which were an extension of the long barracks of today, across from the grey marble cenotaph. The east wall and the chapel appear somewhat as they did then, except a hospital was located in a second story over the south end of the long barracks. The chapel itself had no roof, and in December, 1835, General Coss had built a ramp and cannon platform at the east end of it where the chancel once was. From the right front corner of the chapel, the defenders had built a wall of tree branches and dirt called a palisade. At a 45-degree angle from that corner of the chapel, the palisade ran to the east end of the south wall and the low barracks. The south wall connected back to the southwest corner, where we are now. To the left of the chapel behind the east wall, there was a courtyard, and, to the left of the courtyard, a cattle pen. The Alamo Gift Museum occupies most of this courtyard site, and a symbolic cattle pen has been located close to the site where it was then. Rooms for the defenders were located along every wall except the north wall and the south end of the west wall. Named for a Spanish cavalry unit, Los Hombres del Alamo, that occupied it for years. The Alamo, meaning cottonwood after the tree, ceased being a mission in 1793. In 1821 it was officially taken over by the Army of Mexico. But the walls of the Alamo remained the walls of a mission, not a fort. They had no holes, called embrasures, for the men to fire through. So the men had to stand on low platforms, called parapets, which were built below the main walls, so a man could crouch and aim his rifle over the top of the main wall. In that way, the walls protected the Texicans and Tejanos when they were firing at distant targets. But when the targets were standing against the walls below them, the defenders were forced to expose themselves to Mexican army fire when they leaned over and fired down. Let's continue the tour by walking around the perimeter I have just described. End of chapter. Page 70. Please for help. Siege Day 7. Main Gate. Let's imagine that we have arrived at the main gate of the Alamo on Monday, February 29, 1836. When Santana arrived 6 days ago, the Texicans and Tejanos closed and barred this gate against a mass assault they expected that day. But no major assault by the Army of Mexico has yet come. In fact, it appears now that placing his troops and artillery across the river from the Alamo was an attempt by Santana to protect himself from an attack by the Texicans and Tejanos. Last Thursday, when Santana's soldiers made their brief attack from La Villita, they got as close as the site of the gazebo behind us. That attack failed because the chief engineer, Major Green B.J. Masson, fortified the area outside the main gate with a circular wall of wood and dirt, called a lunette. The artillery commander, Captain William R. Carey, placed 2 6-pounder smoothbore cannons in the lunette, and used them to repel the attack. Although the Texicans and Tejanos have not opened this gate to launch an all-out offensive, they have opened it many times for other reasons. The first day, with the blood-red flag still flying above the San Fernando Cathedral and Santana refusing to negotiate, Travis opened the gate to dispatch couriers far and wide to carry pleas for reinforcements and ammunition. The first riders were Dr. John Sutherland, on an undisclosed mission, and John W. Smith, who carried a letter east to Andrew Ponton, alcalde of Gonzales. The same day William P. Johnson rode south with a letter for Colonel James Fannin at Goliad, located on the San Antonio River 90 miles south of Bear. The next day Travis sent Albert Martin east to Gonzales with a letter that was ultimately read by millions of people. It was addressed to the people of Texas and all Americans in the world. On Thursday, 4 days ago, the gate was opened again when John W. Baylor carried another message to Goliad, and Charles Despolia rode for Gonzales. Robert Brown was also dispatched Thursday, but his destination is unknown to us. That night Captain Juan Seguin borrowed Gimboe's horse and rode out with a special letter from Travis to General Sam Houston. On Saturday James Butler Bonham was sent to Goliad to plead with Fannin for help, and today William S. Urey rode out as a courier to an unknown place. Now, after almost a week, the men of Texas must certainly know that they are needed in the Alamo. So where are they? The population of Texicans who came to Texas from the U.S. is estimated at 30,000. Are there no more men willing to come here and fight? Well, the answer is, except for the 320 men with Fannin at Goliad, these Texicans are scattered all over Texas, and they are without unity, organization, and leadership. Until about 2 months ago, the Texicans and Tejanos were divided into 2 political factions with opposite opinions about how to deal with Mexican government tyranny. Some, the War Party, wanted to fight. Others, the Peace Party, wanted to wait. 6 months ago, War Party member Stephen F. Austin returned to Texas from a Mexico City prison and reported that Santana had abrogated the Mexican Constitution of 1824 and assumed dictatorial powers. At Austin's urging, the War Party elected a committee to direct the formation of a government. 5 months ago, on October 5, 1835, that committee declared war on Mexico. In opposition to the War Party action, 4 months ago the Peace Party led the formation of a provisional government of the Mexican state of Texas, independent from the state of Coahuila. Although the provisional government was then dominated by the Peace Party, the War Party gained strength by having 2 of its members named to important posts. Henry Smith was appointed governor and Sam Houston was appointed commander-in-chief of the army. Unfortunately there were few conscripted, regular army soldiers and Houston was given no power over the more numerous militia volunteers. 2 months ago, it was the volunteers, such as Bowie and his men, who drove General Cos and the last of the Army of Mexico out of Texas. Then, believing that the war was over, many of the volunteers left Bear to return to their homes, and all but 104 of the men still in bear at that time marched off to invade Mexico as part of what was called the Matamoros expedition. The provisional government appointed Colonel Fannin to lead the Matamoros expedition because General Sam Houston had refused to do so. Besides taking most of the men, this doomed expedition took almost all of the ammunition, food, winter clothing, and medical supplies that were in the Alamo. Now the Matamoros expedition, stalled with Fannin at Goliad for 2 months, no longer needs to invade the Republic of Mexico to fight its army. 46 days ago, on January 14, 1836, Colonel James C. Neal, then commander of the Alamo, reported that he had lost even more men because they had not been paid. This left him, he wrote, with only 75 men who were fit for duty. Alamo troop strength was at its lowest. Then 41 days ago, it appeared that the men were beginning to come back to the Alamo when Jim Bowie arrived from Goliad with 30 men, including 26-year-old James Butler Bonham of South Carolina. But Bowie had brought orders from General Houston to abandon and blow up the Alamo. However, something held Bowie back, for on February 7, he wrote Governor Smith saying that he did not plan to follow Houston's order. Then 26 days ago, the Alamo force grew yet again when Travis rode in with 25 Texas Army regulars. 3 days later, Colonel David Crockett of Tennessee rode in from Nacogdoches with 12 men under the command of Captain William B. Harrison. These men called themselves the Tennessee Mounted Volunteers. Crockett's arrival brought the number of Alamo defenders to 156. 19 days ago, on February 11, 1836, Colonel Neal passed command of the regular army troops in the Alamo to young Travis. That same day, the volunteers elected Colonel Jim Bowie to be their commander, as was their right. Now, no more men have come in the past 18 days, yet there is new hope. A few minutes ago a sentry on top of the Alamo Chapel said he saw Mexican army troops heading south. The sentry said he counted a full battalion of Mexican army infantry and most of Santana's cavalry heading out from La Villita down the Goliad Road. Perhaps Santana has heard that Texican troops are approaching from that direction, and he has sent a force to intercept them. That could mean that Fannin is coming at last. Even if Texican reinforcements are not coming, the threat that they are may delay Santana's attack until his soldiers return and he is at full troop strength again. Troop strength in the Alamo, of 156 men remains the same today, on the 6th day of the siege, as it was on the first day. But even with constant cannon bombardment for 6 days, even with the couriers risking their lives riding through the Mexican army lines, despite the battle at the main gate, and despite the cavalry engagement on the Gonzales Road, still not one Alamo defender has been killed or wounded. But there is a man dying in the Alamo. His name is Jim Bowie, and we will visit the site of his room next. End of chapter. Page 78. Help arrives. Siege Day 8, Bowie's room. Imagine that today is Tuesday, March 1, 1836, which marks the beginning of the second week of the siege. The sky cleared last night, allowing the temperature to drop to 36 degrees. The cold weather has been especially hard on Jim Bowie, who lies sick on a cot in his room. The leading medical man in the Alamo, Dr. Pollard, says that Bowie has recovered from a recent case of typhoid fever but that he is dying from an advanced case of tuberculosis. The men say Bowie appears delirious much of the time. Although he was sharing command of the Alamo with Travis, Bowie has been ill for some time. He finally admitted last Wednesday that he could not perform his duties, and he told his men to obey Travis. Since that day Colonel Travis has commanded alone. 3 men in the Alamo are referred to as Colonel, Travis, Bowie, and Crockett. But only Travis, a lieutenant colonel, has proper claim to that rank in the eyes of the provisional government of Texas. However, in most states, volunteer militia units are allowed to elect their own officers. Both Colonel Bowie of Texas and Colonel Crockett of Tennessee were so elected. Besides serving in the militia of Tennessee, 49-year-old Crockett served in the Tennessee legislature after earning his reputation as a backwoodsman and a bear hunter. In his book Alamo Defenders, Bill Groneman describes Crockett as a man of average height with a solid build, a firm chin, and a long, hawk-like nose. After his service in the Tennessee legislature, Crockett went on to serve in the United States House of Representatives, until he publicly opposed, and thereby embarrassed, President Andrew Jackson. So President Jackson sponsored a candidate who defeated Crockett in the fall election of 1835. Then, always clever with words, Crockett told his former constituents that, if they would not re-elect him, they could go to hell, and he would go to Texas. So here he is, looking for new political opportunities. Perhaps because of their similar maturity and the fact that they are the two most famous frontiersmen living in America, Bowie and Crockett have become good friends, and Crockett seems to take a special interest in the medical care given to Bowie, who lies shivering on his cot from high fever and low temperatures. The men on the Alamo walls are shivering, too. They have no cold weather clothing, and rarely can they leave their posts for the warmth of a fire on the ground below them. But despite conditions in the Alamo, there is rejoicing among the men today. Around 1 this morning, while Santana's soldiers were off down the Goliad Road, a party of 32 men rode into the Alamo from the Gonzales Road. Reinforcements have finally come. They are called the Gonzales Ranging Company of Mounted Volunteers. The small town of Gonzales now has 37 men in the Alamo, and they deserve the highest praise. But praise is the last thing on the mind of one of the Gonzales men who was shot in the foot last night by a Texican sentry at the main gate. In the dark, the sentry mistook the Gonzales group for a Mexican army patrol, and now Travis can no longer claim the Alamo is without casualties. But John W. Smith, the courier that Travis sent to Gonzales, is saying things could have been much worse for them if they had followed a mysterious rider who approached them on their way to the main gate. The mysterious horseman rode out of the dark and, in perfect English, offered to lead the Gonzales group into the Alamo. Smith says he sensed something not quite right about the man who rode back into the dark when the horseman heard someone threaten to shoot him. An Alamo defender is saying that Santana has a number of European officers in his army, many of whom speak English without an accent. In fact, Santana's second-in-command, General Vicente Filisola, is from Italy. The mysterious rider was probably one of these English-speaking, Mexican army officers trying to play a deadly trick. In celebration of the arrival of the Gonzales men and in response to this Mexican army trickery, Travis has given Captain Amron Dickinson an order to expend 2 12-pounder cannonballs. As ordered, the gunners fire one and then the other of the cannonballs at Santana's headquarters, the Yatari House. Captain Dickinson says he thinks one of the cannonballs has hit the house. While we wait to hear if the shot found Santana at home, let's walk to the eastern perimeter of the Alamo. On the way we will stop in the Alamo Gardens. End of chapter. Page 86, Republic of Texas declared, Siege Day 9, Alamo Gardens. In our story of the Alamo, imagine that another night has passed, and today is Wednesday, March 2, 1836. The weather is clear and calm, with an even lower temperature of 34 degrees early this morning. We have learned that a cannonball fired yesterday by Captain Dickinson did hit the Yatari house, but Santana was not in it at the time. Still, Santana is probably annoyed that the Alamo defenders have put a hole in his roof with a Mexican cannonball they took from his army back in December. He would be even more annoyed if he knew about a group of political rebels who announced today that they have officially decided to take all of Texas away from him. The rebel Congress met today at Washington on the Brazos and adopted the Declaration of Independence for the Republic of Texas. It seems that the war party has become a majority. These Texicans will now be called Texans. Clearly these Texans do not share Santana's fearful view of the world, and his threats to slaughter them have only steeled their resolve to fight him. The men here in the Alamo are feeling greater resolve as well, not because of a change in their citizenship but because of the arrival of the men from Gonzales. There is new hope among all the men that many more defenders will soon arrive at the Alamo. They are saying that, if only Fannin would come now with his men and ammunition, They might be able to turn the tables on Santa Anna before his army reaches full strength. We will share their hope as we continue our survey of the outside boundaries of the Alamo and go to the cattle pen, where the Alamo food supply was kept. End of chapter. Page 92. Little hope remains. Siege Day 10, Cattle Pen. To the right while facing the outside wall in the cattle pen stands a cannon bearing a plaque that says the cannon was used here in the Battle of the Alamo. Based on its measurements, it is probably a 12-pounder howitzer and could be the cannon that was fired at Santa Anna's headquarters from the west wall. Imagine we are here on Thursday, March 3, 1836, and the weather is clear and calm with a temperature of 40 degrees. The temperature is rising, as were the spirits of the men and women in the Alamo until today. Today, James Butler Bonham returned from Goliad to tell Travis that Fannin is not coming. Bonham reports that Fannin received Travis's first plea for help, and, within 3 days, he marched from Goliad. Fannin was bringing 300 men, 4 cannons, and plenty of ammunition. But after traveling only 200 yards, a wagon broke down. Fannin's men spent the balance of the first day trying to pull the remaining wagons and cannons across the San Antonio River, with not enough oxen to do the job. It was there, within sight of Goliad, that Fannin's force camped for the night. By morning the few oxen they did have had wandered away because no one bothered to tether them. That morning Fannin's officers requested a council of war, and the decision was made to stay and defend Goliad instead of marching to the rescue of the Alamo. Bonham further reported that Fannin had subsequently reconsidered the decision and was again planning to march to Bear. Then Fannin learned that a Mexican army force under General Urrea, estimated at 900 infantry and 100 cavalry, had crossed the Rio Bravo at Matamoros on Wednesday, February 17. Urrea's brigade was heading for San Patricio. From the Goliad, only 90 miles northeast of San Patricio, would be just a 4-day march for Urrea. So Fannin decided to stay and wait for Urrea to attack him. Now, unless men are on their way to the Alamo from San Felipe or other points east of Gonzales, there will be only 189 fighters in the Alamo to face Santa Anna when he decides to attack. To make matters worse, the riflemen on the Alamo walls report a new line of Mexican army troops is pouring into Military Plaza with more cannons in tow. It is certain that Travis is now trying to make a realistic appraisal of his position, and we will do the same after we walk to the location of the North Wall. The North Wall stood at a site near where the lobby of the U.S. Post Office is now. End of chapter. Page 98. Travis's last letter, Siege Day 11, North Wall. According to the diary of the Mexican Army's Colonel Juan Armenti, the morning of Friday, March 4, 1836, is windy with the temperature of 42 degrees in Bear. If we visited Washington on the Brazos on this day, we would learn that the new government of Texas has at last united all Texas soldiers, regulars and volunteers, under one leader by appointing Sam Houston Major General and Commander-in-Chief of the Army. Houston is the most experienced military officer in Texas, having fought under General Andrew Jackson in the Alabama Creek Indian War of 1813 to 1814. Whether Houston's appointment will have any effect on the situation in the Alamo remains to be seen. Similarly, if we were allowed into Santa Anna's headquarters today, we would learn that he has approximately 2,400 Mexican Army soldiers in Bear, and he has called his generals and colonels to a council of war. There are at least another 2,400 Mexican Army soldiers still on the Camino de la Pito en route to Bear, so the battalion commanders and adjutants are debating the issue: attack now or wait for more men and artillery. Generals Cos and Castrillan, along with Colonels Oraniela and Romero, want to wait for the arrival of 2 12-pounder cannons so they can blow holes in the walls of the Alamo and then fire on the men inside with muskets, grape shot, and canister shot. This plan would mean waiting to attack, but it would save Mexican lives by throwing iron at the Texans instead of human beings. Conversely, Generals Santa Anna and Ramirez, along with Colonel Armenti, want to attack immediately. The other 3 Mexican Army officers in attendance do not express their opinion on the matter. We see the Council of War adjourn without a directive from Santa Anna regarding the attack. None of the developments at Washington on the Brazos or at Santana's headquarters is known to anyone in the Alamo. What the Alamo defenders do know and feel is best summed up by a letter that Travis dispatched yesterday to his friend Jesse Grimes at Washington on the Brazos. "I am still here," Travis wrote, "in fine spirits, and well-to-do. I have held this place for 10 days against a force variously estimated from 1,500 to 6,000, and shall continue to hold it until I get relief from my country or I will perish in its defense. We have had a shower of bombs and cannonballs continually falling among us the whole time, yet none of us has fallen. We have been miraculously preserved. You have no doubt seen my official report of the action of the 25th, in which we repulsed the enemy with considerable loss. On the night of the 25th they made another attempt to charge us in the rear of the fort, but we received them gallantly by a discharge of grape shot and musketry, and they took to their scrapers immediately. They are now encamped in entrenchments on all sides of us. All our couriers have gotten out without being caught, and a company of 32 men from Gonzales got in 2 nights ago, and Colonel Bonham got in today by coming between the powder house and the enemy's upper encampment. Let the convention go on and make a declaration of independence, and you will then understand, and the world will understand, what we are fighting for. If independence is not declared, I shall lay down my arms, and so will the men under my command. But under the flag of independence, we are ready to peril our lives 100 times a day, and to drive away the monster who is fighting us under a blood-red flag, threatening to murder all prisoners and make Texas a waste desert. I shall have to fight the enemy on his own terms, yet I am ready to do it, and if my countrymen do not rally to my relief, I am determined to perish in the defense of this place, and my bones shall reproach my country for her neglect. With 500 men more, I will drive Sesma beyond the Rio Grande, and I will visit vengeance on the enemy of Texas. My respects to all my friends. God bless you. It is time to learn more about these men in the Alamo. Let's walk over to the gray marble cenotaph and continue the story. End of chapter. Page 104, A Line in the Dirt, Siege Day 12, Cenotaph. We are beside the Alamo Cenotaph, which was dedicated in 1940 as part of the centennial of Texas independence in 1936. A cenotaph is defined as a monument built for someone who is deceased and buried elsewhere. The cenotaph sits on the site of one of the 3 funeral pyres that consumed the bodies of the Alamo defenders. Made of Georgia gray marble, the cenotaph rests on a slab base of Texas pink granite. The great shaft rises 60 feet from its base, which is 40 feet in length and 12 feet in width. The name of the monument is the Spirit of Sacrifice, as represented by a magnificent idealistic figure rising 23 feet, from the long, sloping capstone. The capstone symbolizes a tomb. On the opposite side a feminine figure symbolizes Texas. The names of 180 Alamo defenders are carved into the cenotaph. Since 1940 historians have learned more and corrected the list of men who died in the Alamo battle, removing some of the names that are on the monument and adding some names that are not. This process goes on. Imagining that another night has passed, today is Saturday, March 5, 1836. The morning temperature was 50 degrees, and now, in the afternoon, the air has warmed to 68 degrees. This is one of those glorious days that make living in Bear so pleasant, and with a few more like it, the wildflowers will bloom. Queen Anne's lace, desert marigold, rock rose, and Texas bluebonnet, some of those wildflowers will be picked by young men for their sweethearts. Some will mark graves. On this beautiful day the men in the Alamo remain at their posts while the Mexican army cannons, much closer now, pound the Alamo walls and plaza. Each night with the protection of darkness the Mexican army's apadores workers build mounds of dirt, called breastworks, closer and closer to the Alamo. The breastworks have allowed Santana to move his artillery to within 200 yards of the Alamo walls. Increasingly heavy cannon fire from the north has opened a sizable breach in the east end of the north wall. Engineer, Major Green B. J. Masson, and his men can only fill this gap with wood and dirt. Though the Alamo was built from the very limestone it rests upon, J. Masson has no way to cut the stone or to make mortar. Though the heavy Mexican army fire continues for the 12th day, still no Texan has fallen from Mexican army fire. There are 189 defenders in the Alamo, and they are now outnumbered by the Army of Mexico 13 to 1. None of the Alamo defenders is experienced in military strategy and tactics, yet all have done a remarkable job of defending a place that was not designed to be defended. There are 116 riflemen to defend 1,320 feet of wall. That gives each rifleman over 11 feet of wall to defend when the Army of Mexico starts climbing ladders and ropes and coming over. Most riflemen keep 3 or 4 rifles loaded beside them because even the fastest men take 60 seconds to load, ram, prime, cock, aim, and fire a flintlock rifle. There are 31 artillerymen to operate 18 cannons. That is less than 2 men per piece to load, ram, prime, aim, and fire muzzle-loading artillery pieces, when the Mexican army is coming at them between blasts. Who are these men? From where did they come? Why did they come and why do they stay? Well, they are men who have earned their living as doctors, lawyers, merchants, farmers, trappers, and many other things. Their average age is 28½ years. They came from 22 states and 6 foreign countries. 100 of them now make their home in Texas. 85 men have someone in the Alamo from the town where they live, including the 37 from Gonzales. 87 of the men fought in the first Battle of the Alamo last December. The men came here for different reasons. Some, such as Micaiah Autry, came to earn land in Texas. Others, such as Cleveland Kinloch Simmons, came for the adventure of a new place. Some, such as the 3 Taylor brothers from Liberty, Texas, came because friends or relatives were coming. Others, such as David P. Cummings, came to fight for Texas liberty. Some, such as William T. Malone, were running away from someone. Others, such as David Crockett, were looking for new friends and political opportunities. Some, such as William Barrett Travis, came for fame and fortune. Others, such as Jim Bowie, were just looking for a place to die. The men came for different reasons, but most stayed for a common reason. In his book, A Time to Stand, Walter Lord probably said it best. Bound together by common peril, he wrote, none dared to be the first to give in. But another reason lay even deeper. They simply could not shake the conviction that here, above all, was the place to stand. Sooner or later everyone would see it. Meanwhile they must hold out till the rest of Texas woke up. 8 men personified the Alamo spirit by leaving and then returning to the Alamo with full knowledge of what they were returning to. 3 in particular, James Butler Bonham, Charles Despoilier, and Albert Martin, left the Alamo as couriers, returned during the siege, and stayed for the fight. All 3 could have remained away with honor. Now the rest of the men are being given the same choice about staying. It is 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The Mexican army artillery fire has ceased, and Travis has called all of the men down from the walls. He is asking them to assemble in the plaza near where we are. And we can hear Travis tell the men that there is little hope of reinforcements coming or getting through the Mexican army lines, even if they do come. He says that he expects an attack at any time, and he tells the men that they must make a choice now. They can surrender, he says, or try to escape, or stay in the Alamo and fight with him to the end. Now he draws a line in the dirt with his sword and asks those who will stay and fight to cross over it. 26-year-old artilleryman Tapley Holland is the first man across the line, followed by Bowie who is carried, then Crockett, and all of the others except one. Louis Rose, a 50-year-old former non-commissioned officer in the French army of Napoleon Bonaparte, does not cross the line. He says that, after dark, he will go over the wall and try to escape through the Mexican army lines. Rose will be the only person now inside the Alamo to escape this night, and he will be the source of the report about Travis's line in the dirt. As all the others return to their posts on the walls, the cannon fire begins again. Soon it seems, The time is 11:30 at night, and there has been no cannon fire for over an hour. We see the men relaxing in the quiet, and it is time for us to leave the Alamo. We will go to the gazebo at the south end of Alamo Plaza and continue the story. End of chapter. Page 112. The last day, gazebo. If we imagine it is Sunday, March 6, 1836, then the end has come. This morning just after 5 a.m., a Mexican army bugle sounded from Powder House Hill 1 mile to the southeast. In the darkness 4 Mexican army columns attacked the Alamo from different directions. The Mexican army artillery had remained silent since 10 p.m. last night, and most of the Texans were asleep when the bugle sounded. Then, it is said, the Mexican army band began to play a Moorish fire and death call known as El Deguayo. Roused from their sleep, the men in the Alamo had no time to prepare their minds for what was happening. They began to fight instinctively. Mexican Army General Cos, with companies of the Aldama and San Luis battalions, attacked the northwest corner, while Colonel Duque, with companies of the San Luis and Toluca battalions, advanced beside them at the north wall. Together their force totaled 700 men. Colonel Ronero with 300 troops from the Jimenez and Matamoros battalions attacked the east wall north of the cattle pen, and Colonel Morales led 125 men of the Jimenez, Matamoros, and San Luis battalions against the southwest corner. Santana held 400 men in reserve at the Powder House, including the Grenadiers, elements of all infantry battalions, their Zapadores battalion, and the Dolores cavalry. The first 2 Mexican army charges were repulsed by the Texans, but a third charge, concentrated at the breach at the east end of the north wall, broke through. Soon the Mexican army was inside the Alamo walls, and those Texans who were still alive fell back to the long barracks and the chapel. By 6:30 a.m. the fighting had stopped, and all of the Texan soldiers had either died in the battle, or as Santana's blood-red flag had promised, been killed when captured. Travis died at the north wall from a bullet to the head during the first charge. It is said that Crockett died defending the palisade near the front door of the chapel, and Bowie died inside the chapel in the middle room on the left. Bonham, Dickinson, and Jose Gregorio Esparza died where they fought, on the cannon platform at the east end of the chapel. It is said that Robert Evans came within inches of exploding the powder magazine in the chapel. Had he succeeded, the explosion would surely have killed the 9 women and 10 children who were huddled in the chapel. Most of the other defenders also died where they fought. Dolphin Ward Floyd died on his 32nd birthday. Page 116, Epilogue. That this battle took place or that any of these men, Mexican or Texan, died in this way, is an abomination to be blamed on Santana alone. In his book, The Alamo, John Myers calls Santana one of history's complete villains. His assertion is true, and 41 days after the Alamo massacre, fate finally turned its back on this evil man. On Thursday, April 21, 1836, Santana lost his dream of holding Texas. At San Jacinto, near Houston, Sam Houston and 783 Texans caught Santana in the open with only 1,150 men. They cut off his routes of reinforcement and escape. Some of the Texans who fought that day at San Jacinto were driven by the shame they felt for not going to the rescue of their brothers in the Alamo. Others were not aware, until it was too late for them to help in the Alamo, but they too felt guilty just the same. All of the men had the name of the Alamo on their lips as they charged, and in just 18 minutes they redeemed themselves by defeating all of Santana's soldiers. Santana himself escaped but was later found by the Texans dressed as a private and hiding in the bushes near the battlefield. Ultimately, after he had signed the Treaty of Velasco, the Texans sent Santana back to Mexico in defeat and shame, and although he tried to take back Texas again and again through the years that followed, he never succeeded. This is the end of our story, and it is time to visit the Alamo Chapel, now called the Alamo Shrine. As you approach, a few feet in front of the threshold of the shrine, look down. You will see a brass bar that commemorates the line that Travis is said to have drawn in the dirt with his sword. Inside the shrine, Be sure to see the Virumendi Palace doors on display above the apps.